Have you ever noticed how your paycheck always feels like it is almost enough to live on, but not quite enough to actually get ahead? You pay your rent, your utilities, your groceries, your phone bill, and somehow, after doing everything you are supposed to do as a responsible adult, you end up with just enough money left over to avoid panicking, but not enough to actually build anything meaningful. You are not drowning, but you are definitely not swimming either. You are just floating in place like a tired lifeguard on their 20th shift of the summer. And the strangest part is that everyone around you seems to be in the exact same situation. Your friends, your coworkers, your neighbors, all stuck in this financial middle ground where life is technically fine but permanently stressful. Here's the thing most people never stop to question. What if your salary was not just a number your employer came up with based on fairness and market value? What if it was a system intentionally structured to keep you in this exact spot, comfortable enough that you keep working, uncomfortable enough that you cannot leave, satisfied enough to avoid rebellion, anxious enough to never stop grinding? When you live in that tension long enough, it starts to feel normal. You tell yourself this is just adulthood. You convince yourself everyone lives like this forever. But stay with me, because once you see how the system is built, it is hard to unsee it, and it explains why, no matter how many raises you get, you always end up right back where you started. My name is Michael, and I help people understand money the way school never did, not with boring charts or dusty definitions, but with the truth about how the system actually works and why so many people who work hard every day still feel like they are falling behind. Because once you understand the game, you can finally stop being controlled by it. Your salary is not designed to make you wealthy. It is designed to make you predictable. Think about it. The moment you get your first real job, everybody celebrates like you just won the financial lottery. The steady paycheck, the benefits, the direct deposit notification hitting your phone, it feels like the beginning of a stable adult life. Until you realize that almost every financial choice you make after that point is shaped entirely around the limits of that salary. You pick an apartment based on what that salary can handle. You choose a car payment based on what that salary can manage. You build habits, routines, obligations, and commitments that all fit neatly within the boundaries the salary draws for you. You build a life around the exact amount of money that will keep you dependent on that job. Here's where it gets crazy. The system works best when you earn just enough to stay comfortable, but not enough to build any real power. Imagine a person making $30,000 a year. That person struggles constantly. They know they are underpaid. They know the system is not fair. They are far more likely to question everything about their employer and the economy because their survival depends on it. Now imagine someone making $300,000 a year. That person has more power, more leverage, more choices. They can threaten to leave. They can negotiate. They can walk away without their life collapsing. These people cost companies a lot of money because they have options. But the person making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, even $100,000 per year, they are the perfect employee. They are comfortable enough to stay quiet, but not comfortable enough to leave. And that is exactly the point. You can see this play out in everyday life. Take rent, for example. It never drops. It rises slowly but consistently, always floating right around what the average salaried worker can barely afford. A landlord knows that if they raise rent too high, people will move out. But if they raise it just a little, year after year, people accept it because moving is expensive, draining, and inconvenient. The psychological cost of changing your life is higher than the financial cost of staying put, so people stay. Your salary is structured around this same principle. It keeps you comfortably trapped. Here is the emotional consequence. You start thinking your financial stress is your fault. You start believing you are the problem. You think if you were just a little more disciplined, a little more organized, a little more responsible, you would be perfectly fine. But the truth is, the system is designed to keep you exactly one step behind financial stability. And once you internalize that belief, you are easier to control. Punchline: your paycheck is not freedom. It is a leash with a slightly padded handle. Here is where it gets interesting. Every time you get a raise, your expenses rise with it. People love to call this lifestyle creep as if it is some personal failing on your part, but no one talks about why it happens. When you earn just enough money to feel slightly less stressed, you naturally start fixing the parts of your life that have been broken for years. Your car that has been limping along, your clothes that are falling apart, your apartment that has mold in the corner, your ability to finally buy food that is not the cheapest possible option. These are not luxuries. These are baseline upgrades that most adults should be able to afford. But because they are slightly nicer than what you had before, the world labels it lifestyle creep. Then, when your new expenses match your new income, everyone acts shocked like you did something irresponsible. But you did not. You just finally bought things that made your life tolerable. Real life example. Imagine someone making $60,000 a year who finally gets a raise to $75,000. They think, this is it. I finally made it. But then everything starts shifting. Rent has gone up. Groceries somehow cost 20% more than last year. Their car needs repairs. Their phone is dying. Their dentist says they need work done. Before they know it, that raise is gone. They are right back at the same stress level as before, but now they blame themselves instead of the system. Here's the emotional consequence. You feel like you are sprinting on a treadmill that keeps slowly speeding up. You never fall off, but you never get ahead either. You just keep running until you are too tired to question why you are even doing it. Punchline. Your raise did not fail. It was absorbed. Stay with me. This is the part nobody talks about. Companies do not reward loyalty. They reward dependency. If you are too comfortable, you might leave. If you are too stressed, you might quit. The sweetest spot for an employer is the employee who feels grateful but financially insecure. They will work harder. They will not question long hours. They will not negotiate aggressively. They will not leave for a better opportunity because the fear of instability keeps them anchored. That is why salaries rise slower than the cost of living. If wages grew faster than expenses, people would develop power. They would save money. They would invest. They would build leverage. And leveraged people are harder to control. Real life example. Consider health insurance. It is not offered out of generosity. It is offered because it locks you in. If your job pays you $80,000, but your health insurance is tied to that job, walking away feels like jumping without a parachute. Most people tolerate miserable work environments for years because losing their benefits would be catastrophic. The system is not stupid. It knows exactly how to keep you tied to your desk. Here is the emotional consequence. You feel like you owe your company something for giving you benefits, even though they are only offering what they need to in order to keep you there. Punchline. The benefits are not benefits. They are chains wrapped in gift paper. Here's where it gets crazy. Companies often give small yearly raises that are just enough to keep employees hopeful. 2% here, 3% there, maybe 4% if your manager really likes you. These tiny increases feel like progress, but when inflation rises at the exact same rate, you are not getting ahead. You are staying in place. It is like giving someone a glass of water while the room keeps getting hotter. It feels helpful, but you are still sweating. Real life example. At many companies, an employee who stays for 10 years might earn $10,000 more per year than when they started. But someone hired from the outside to do the same job might start at $15,000 or $20,000 more. Companies know that long-term employees tend to accept lower raises because they are comfortable, they are loyal. They are used to the routine. The new hire has leverage. You do not. That is the system. Here is the emotional consequence. You start feeling grateful for crumbs while other people are getting full meals. You start believing that this is the best you can do. Punchline. Loyalty costs you money. Dependency costs you freedom. Most people never notice this next part. Your salary is intentionally delivered in predictable intervals. Every 2 weeks or every month, you get the same number. Predictability creates calm. Calm prevents revolt. Imagine if salaries were paid yearly. People would see exactly how much they earned in one giant number, and they would immediately question why so much of their life is controlled by such a small amount. But when it is broken into paychecks, it feels manageable. It feels normal. It hides the truth of how small the number really is in the grand scheme of what your life requires. Stay with me. The real system is not built to help you rise. It is built to keep you participating. If salaries were high enough that people built wealth quickly, companies would lose their most valuable resource, consistency. When people have financial security, they become unpredictable. They leave bad managers. They quit toxic jobs. They switch careers. They start businesses. They say no. A predictable workforce is the backbone of corporate stability. Your salary is the price paid to keep you predictable. Real life example. People stay in miserable jobs for the simplest financial reason in the world. The paycheck arrives predictably and their bills arrive predictably. They would rather suffer in a stable pattern than risk the temporary chaos of changing careers. That is not laziness. That is survival instinct. Here's the emotional consequence. You start confusing stability with happiness. You think being comfortable is the same as being fulfilled. Punchline: a warm cage is still a cage. Here's the part nobody ever says out loud. Jobs are priced based on what it takes to keep someone in the job, not based on the value they create. If you produce $200,000 worth of value, but your employer knows that someone like you in your demographic, location, industry, and age group will stay for $80,000, they will pay you $80,000. When companies say they pay based on market rates, they are not talking about value. They are talking about the psychological threshold that keeps people compliant. Real-life example. Almost every salaried worker has had this moment. You find out a coworker who does less work than you makes more money. You find out a new hire makes more than you. You find out someone with fewer skills negotiated better. Suddenly you realize your salary has almost nothing to do with fairness and everything to do with what you accepted when you were desperate. Salaries are not earned. They are agreed to. That is the game. Here is the emotional consequence. You feel undervalued but stuck, angry but powerless, motivated but trapped. Punchline: you were not underpaid. You were under-negotiated. Now let us talk about a big one: taxes. This will sting. Most middle-class salaried workers sit in the exact tax zone that drains wealth but never touches the wealthy. The wealthy live off investments, deductions, and corporate structures. The poor earn too little to be taxed seriously. The middle class, they get squeezed like an orange at brunch. And what keeps them there? Salaries. Salaries are easy to tax. They are predictable. They are trackable. They are the perfect financial target. Real-life example. Look at your paycheck. The amount you lose in taxes every month is more than what many people invest. But because it is automatically deducted, you never feel the pain directly. If you had to physically write a check to the government every month, people would riot. But the system is structured so you never see the full amount. Predictability makes obedience easier. Here is the emotional consequence. You feel like you are working for everyone except yourself. Punchline: your salary is taxed before you ever touch it for a reason. Here is where it gets interesting again. When you rely fully on a salary, your brain becomes wired to trade time for money. You start believing that the only way to earn more is to work more. You settle into this mental box without realizing it. The system loves this mindset because it keeps you operating within the boundaries it set. You stop thinking about building wealth. You start thinking about surviving until Friday. You stop thinking about investing. You start thinking about overtime. You stop thinking about creating. You start thinking about coping. Real-life example. Most salary earners tie every aspiration in their life to their paycheck timing. They say things like, I will start saving when I get my next raise. I will invest once my debt is gone. I will switch careers once I build some savings. But those moments never come because the salary is intentionally calibrated so that nothing ever feels fully attainable. Here's the emotional consequence. Your dreams shrink to fit your paycheck. Punchline: you are not living your life. You are living your salary. This is the part nobody talks about. When you rely entirely on a single salary, you are financially vulnerable, emotionally exhausted, and mentally distracted. These three states combined make you the perfect consumer. When people are stressed, they buy things to cope. When people feel stuck, they buy things to escape. When people feel behind, they buy things to feel ahead. We live in a society where people who feel financially limited spend more money than people who are actually wealthy, not because they want things, but because they want relief. Real-life example. Think about the average salaried worker at the end of a long week. They are exhausted. They grab takeout because cooking feels like another job. They scroll through online stores looking for something to make them feel better. They treat themselves because they feel like they earned it. They go out for drinks because they need to decompress. And all of it feels harmless until the credit card bill shows up. And then the cycle continues. Here is the emotional consequence. You end up paying for comfort that your salary should have already given you. Punchline: you are leasing relief from your own stress. Here is where it gets crazy again. The system counts on you investing nothing. If the average salaried worker invested consistently, companies would lose control over the labor market. People with money choose differently. People with investments negotiate differently. People with options walk away differently. A workforce with financial stability is a threat. So the system makes sure your salary covers your life, but never your future. Real-life example. Most people do not start investing until their 30s or 40s because before that, their salary barely allows them to breathe. By the time they finally have enough money to save anything, they have lost decades of compound growth. The system did not just cost them money, it cost them time. Here is the emotional consequence. You start to believe you are late even when the system itself delayed you on purpose. Punchline: you were never behind. You were underfunded. Here's the part that hits hardest. Your salary keeps you dependent on your employer. Your employer keeps you dependent on the system, and the system keeps you dependent on your salary. It is a perfect loop. The moment you try to break free, the fear of losing stability pulls you back in, not because you are weak, but because you were trained to equate predictable income with safety. Real-life example. You have probably had a moment where you thought about quitting your job, switching industries, going back to school, or starting something on your own. And every time, the first thought that stopped you was not passion, not skill, not ability, it was the paycheck. That is the system doing exactly what it was designed to do. Here is the emotional consequence. You start believing freedom is risky and stability is safe. Punchline: the safest choice is often the most expensive one in the long run. Here is the shift. Your salary was never meant to make you wealthy. It was meant to make you manageable. But once you see the design, you can stop being controlled by it. You can build skills that create leverage. You can create income that is not tied to your hours. You can invest so your money works harder than you do. You can negotiate like someone who understands their value instead of someone scared to rock the boat. You can stop treating your salary like your identity and start treating it like just one piece of your financial life. You cannot change the system, but you can stop being shaped by it. You can step out of the predictable cycle and build something that the salary-based world cannot take from you. And that is the point. You do not need to look rich. You need to stop being stressed.